The flash hit first. Not one, not two, but dozens. Relentless. Blinding. Chaotic. The kind of camera flashes that don't just capture a moment, they create history. It was supposed to be a normal night. A quiet dinner. Family only. No drama. No headlines. But the second they stepped out of that black SUV, everything changed. Because standing there, under the harsh glow of paparazzi lights, was a pairing no one had fully processed yet. Not in real life. Not like this. Kylie Jenner. And right beside her, Timothée Chalamet. Not hiding. Not rushing. Not pretending. Just together. Comfortably. Confidently. Like they had nothing left to explain. And that's when the internet, without even realizing it yet, was about to lose its mind. You have to understand something. This wasn't just another celebrity sighting. This wasn't even just about a relationship. This was two completely different worlds, colliding in real time. On one side, you have Kylie Jenner, born into one of the most powerful, calculated, media-savvy families on the planet. A woman who grew up with cameras in her face before she even understood what fame meant. Every move documented. Every relationship analyzed. Every silence questioned. And on the other side, Timothée Chalamet. Quiet. Artistic. Selective. The kind of actor who disappears into roles instead of headlines. Someone who built his identity on not being part of that machine. So when rumors first started, people didn't believe it. They couldn't. Because it didn't fit the narrative. It didn't make sense. It wasn't supposed to happen. But what happened next changed everything. Let's rewind just a few hours earlier. Before the flashes. Before the frenzy. Before the internet detectives started dissecting every frame. Inside a private residence in Los Angeles, the energy was different. Subtle, but unmistakable. There was movement. Preparation. Quiet urgency. Because tonight wasn't just dinner. Tonight was an introduction. Not the kind that gets announced. The kind that gets observed. Carefully. Closely. Judged without a single word being spoken. Because sitting at that table would be two of the most powerful women in entertainment. Kim Kardashian. And Kris Jenner. And if you know anything about this family, you already know. Nothing is casual. Nothing is accidental. Every glance means something. Every silence carries weight. And every new person entering that circle gets evaluated instantly. Now imagine being Timothée, walking into that. Not a movie set. Not a red carpet. But something far more intense. A room where influence isn't performed. It's inherited. Where relationships aren't just emotional. They're strategic. Where every interaction has layers. And for the first time, he wasn't just an observer of fame. He was stepping directly into its center. The door opened. There was a pause. Not awkward. Not tense. Just loaded. Kylie stepped in first. Calm. Collected. But if you looked closely, really closely, you'd notice something subtle. Her pace slowed. Just slightly. Like she was aware that this moment mattered more than she was letting on. Behind her, Timothée followed. And for a split second, he hesitated. Not out of fear, but out of awareness. Because some rooms, you don't just walk into. You enter them carefully. What happened next wasn't dramatic. There were no raised voices. No obvious tension. Just greetings. Smiles. Polite conversation. But underneath all of it, there was analysis. Kim watched quietly. Not judging, just observing. Kris? She noticed everything. The way he stood. The way he spoke. The way Kylie looked at him when she thought no one was paying attention. And that's when something shifted. Not visibly. Not loudly. But internally. Because sometimes, approval doesn't come in words. It comes in the absence of resistance. Dinner moved smoothly. Too smoothly. Which, in this family, means something important was happening. Conversations flowed. Stories were shared. And slowly, Timothée stopped feeling like an outsider. He wasn't performing. He wasn't trying to impress. He was just being himself. And strangely, that worked. But here's the part no one saw coming. Because while everything inside felt controlled, measured, almost calm, outside, a completely different story was unfolding. Someone had tipped off the paparazzi. No one knows who. No one ever does. But suddenly, cars started lining up. Cameras appeared. Phones were raised. And within minutes, the private dinner wasn't private anymore. Inside, they didn't know yet. But outside, the storm was building. And it was about to hit hard. When dinner ended, there was a brief moment of stillness. That quiet pause before stepping back into the world. Kylie checked her phone. And her expression changed. Just slightly. Not panic. Not fear. But recognition. She knew. They were out there. Waiting. Watching. Ready. She looked at Timothée. And in that look, there was a question. Not spoken. But understood. Are you ready for this? Because once they stepped outside, there was no going back to subtle. No going back to rumors. No going back to maybe. This would be real. Public. Unavoidable. And then, they stepped out. Together. The reaction was instant. Explosive. Cameras flashing like lightning. Voices shouting over each other. Names being called. Questions thrown into the air like bullets. Kylie. Over here. Timothée. Are you guys official? Is this serious? But they didn't answer. They didn't rush. They didn't separate. And that's what broke the internet. Because in that moment, it wasn't about confirmation. It wasn't about statements. It was about presence. They stood side by side. Unbothered. Unhidden. And somehow, that silence said everything. But what happened next? No one was prepared for. Not the fans. Not the media. Not even the people inside that house. Because this wasn't just a relationship reveal. This was the beginning of something far bigger. Something that would spark debates, divide opinions, and rewrite narratives. And here's the question you need to ask yourself. Why did this moment hit so differently? Why did this one night, out of thousands of celebrity outings, feel like a turning point? Because the answer isn't what you think. Before the flashes, before the family dinner, before the internet tried to make sense of something it didn't fully understand, there was silence. Not the peaceful kind, the strategic kind, the kind where something is happening, but no one is supposed to notice yet. Because the truth is, this story didn't start that night. It didn't start with paparazzi photos. And it definitely didn't start when people began connecting dots online. It started months earlier. Quietly. Almost invisibly. And if you weren't paying attention, you would have missed it completely. Let's go back. Early spring. Los Angeles. The kind of afternoon where nothing feels urgent, but everything is moving behind the scenes. Inside a private event, invite-only, carefully curated, two very different circles overlapped. Not publicly, not dramatically, just unnaturally. Creative industry people, fashion insiders, film producers, a mix of power, influence, and carefully controlled exposure. And somewhere in that room, paths crossed. Now, no one can point to the exact second it happened. No viral clip. No confirmed introduction video. But people who were there, they remember the energy. Because sometimes, it's not about what was said. It's about what shifted. Kylie Jenner had already mastered the art of being seen without revealing everything. Years of living under a microscope had taught her one thing. Privacy isn't about hiding. It's about controlling when people are allowed to see. And that night, she wasn't trying to be the center of attention. She didn't need to be. Across the room, Timothée Chalamet was exactly where people expected him to be. Not surrounded by chaos. Not chasing attention. Just present. Observing. Listening. Choosing his conversations carefully. The way someone does when they're used to depth, not noise. And somehow, in a space full of people trying to be noticed, they noticed each other. It wasn't dramatic. No sudden spark. No movie-like moment where everything froze. Just a glance. A brief conversation. And then a separation. They moved on. Spoke to other people. Continued the night. And if you were watching from the outside, you'd think nothing happened. But something did. Something small. But significant. Because from that point on, their names started appearing in the same spaces. Not publicly. Not in headlines. But in circles where information moves differently. Quietly. Through whispers. Through people who don't post what they see, but remember it. At first, it didn't mean anything. Or at least, that's what people assumed. Because on paper, it didn't make sense. Not in the way celebrity relationships usually do. There was no obvious overlap. No shared branding. No predictable narrative. And that's exactly why no one took it seriously. Weeks passed. Then months. And then something subtle changed. It started with timing. The kind of detail most people ignore. Appearances in the same city. At the same time. Leaving similar locations. Arriving separately. Always separately. Because if you understand how high-profile lives work, you know this isn't accidental. And here's where things get interesting. Because in a world where everything is documented, what's missing often tells you more than what's shown. No posts together. No direct acknowledgement. No soft launch. Nothing. And yet, the pattern was there. At this point, the internet hadn't caught on yet. But insiders? They were starting to ask questions. Quiet ones. Careful ones. Because something about this felt intentional. And then, the first real signal appeared. Not loud. Not obvious. But undeniable if you knew where to look. A car. Not just any car. A very specific one. Seen outside Kylie's residence. Late at night. More than once. Now, normally, that wouldn't mean anything. People visit. Friends come and go. But this wasn't random. Because that same car had been spotted in a completely different context before. Connected to someone who, up until that moment, was never linked to that world. And suddenly, the silence started to crack. Online forums lit up. Small accounts began posting theories. Nothing confirmed. Nothing solid. Just speculation. But the kind that spreads fast when it feels possible. Wait, could this actually be happening? No way. That doesn't even make sense. But what if it does? And that's when the narrative started to form. Not from official sources. Not from announcements. But from curiosity. But here's the twist. Because while the internet was just beginning to catch up, they were already ahead of it. This wasn't new to them anymore. They had already moved past the "what is this" stage. Past the uncertainty. Past the early awkwardness. And into something more defined. Private dinners. Low-key meetings. Moments that didn't need validation from the outside world. Because not everything important needs to be posted. But here's the part people don't talk about. The psychological shift. For Kylie, this was different. Not because of who he was, but because of what he wasn't. He wasn't part of the usual circle. He didn't operate within the same rules. He didn't chase visibility. And for someone who had spent her entire life surrounded by controlled exposure, that kind of energy, it changes things. And for Timothée, it was just as complex. Because stepping into this kind of spotlight isn't neutral. It changes perception. It reshapes identity. It invites scrutiny from a completely different audience. And the question wasn't just, do I like her? It was, am I ready for everything that comes with this? Because this wasn't just about two people. It was about two ecosystems. Two cultures of fame. Two completely different ways of existing in the public eye. And somehow, they chose to keep going. But then, something happened that forced things forward. Faster than planned. A leak. Not a big one. Not headline level, but enough. A single photo. Blurry. Taken from a distance. But clear enough to raise eyebrows. They weren't holding hands. They weren't posing. They weren't even facing the camera. But they were together. Unmistakably. And just like that, the internet caught fire. Is this real? Are they actually dating? Since when? How did this even happen? And here's the thing. They still didn't respond. No confirmation. No denial. Nothing. Which only made it bigger. Because silence, in moments like this, is louder than any statement. Now the pressure was building. Public curiosity turning into obsession. Every move being tracked. Every appearance analyzed. Every absence questioned. And behind all of that, a decision was forming. Stay hidden? Or step into it? Because eventually, there's always a moment where private becomes public, where speculation becomes reality, where you either control the narrative, or the narrative controls you. And that moment was closer than anyone realized, because that family dinner from part 1 wasn't spontaneous, it wasn't random, and it definitely wasn't casual. It was a test, not of their relationship, but of something much bigger. Acceptance, integration, visibility. And once that line was crossed, there was no going back. But here's the real question. What happened behind the scenes? Right before that dinner? What conversations were had? What doubts surfaced? What risks were weighed? Because the truth is, that night wasn't just about being seen together. It was about deciding to be seen at all. And in part 3, everything escalates. The pressure, the reactions, the unexpected backlash, and the moment where things almost fell apart. Before the world even understood what was happening, the internet doesn't react. It erupts. And this time, it wasn't gradual. It wasn't slow curiosity building into interest. It was immediate, violent, unforgiving. Within hours of that blurry photo, everything changed. At first, it was confusion, then disbelief, then obsession. Searches spiked. Clips resurfaced. Old interviews were dissected. Every past relationship compared. Every personality trait analyzed like it was evidence in a case no one fully understood. And at the center of it all, 2 people who hadn't said a single word. Kylie Jenner and Timothée Chalamet. But here's where it got complicated. Because the reactions weren't just curiosity. They were divided. Some people loved it. They saw something unexpected, different, refreshing, a break from predictable celebrity pairings. But others? They rejected it completely. It feels fake. This doesn't match. This is PR. He's not that type. She wouldn't go for someone like him. And just like that, the relationship stopped being about them and started becoming a debate. Now imagine experiencing that in real time, not as a spectator, but as the person inside it. For Kylie, this wasn't new. Public scrutiny? She grew up in it. Criticism? Expected. Narratives being created without her input? Normal. But this felt different. Because this time, the judgment wasn't just about her. It was about them. And whether they even made sense. And that changes the pressure. Because it's one thing to carry your own reputation. It's another thing entirely to feel responsible for how someone else is being perceived because of you. Meanwhile, for Timothy, this was unfamiliar territory. He had fans, loyal ones, people who admired his work, his choices, his authenticity. But this was a different audience. A louder one, a faster one, a more reactive one. And suddenly, he wasn't just being evaluated as an actor. He was being evaluated as a partner, a decision, a symbol. And here's the part no one talks about. The moment when noise starts to seep into reality. Because no matter how grounded you are, no matter how self-aware you think you've become, When millions of people are saying something at the same time, you hear it, even if you try not to. The messages, the headlines, the comments, the endless opinions. Is this really right? Does this make sense? Am I missing something? And that's when doubt appears. Not loudly, not dramatically, but quietly, late at night, in moments alone, in the space between what you feel and what the world is telling you to question. But what happened next? No one saw coming. Because just as things were starting to settle, something escalated everything. A second sighting. Not blurry this time. Not distant. Clear. Intentional. They were seen leaving the same location again. But this time, there was no denying it. No ambiguity. No maybe. And that's when the story went from speculation to confirmation without words. The internet didn't slow down. It doubled.